not your first time playing a villain, because you've played before Siler in Heroes and also Dr. Oliver Threadson in American Horror Story. So I'd like to know, how do you prepare for this type of role?
Well, every character is different, but I feel like the through line has to be understanding why they are who they are and trying to come to the experience as an actor with some kind of openness and understanding and compassion for them, even if they're horrible, monstrous villains. You have to understand how they got that way. And each one of those examples that you gave is a very different backstory. But each one of them probably originates in a sense of being abandoned or neglected or abused, some kind of childhood trauma that gets unresolved, that stays unresolved. And I think that's probably a through line between all three of those characters that you mentioned.
Might threaten Christmas land,
but no one has ever been able to enter except me.
Charlie Manx has nothing to do with other vampires that we have seen in fiction, so could you talk a bit more about him?
Yeah, I mean, Charlie Manx is really the creation of Joe Hill and his really amazing, incredible, warped imagination. And Joe and I have had a lot of conversations about where Charlie Manx came from, but he's a really unique character. I think he really genuinely believes that he's doing good for these kids who he's kidnapping and taking to his amusement park called Christmas Land. I think he's someone who really believes in his mission, which makes him a more interesting villain. He's not just being villainous for the sake of it. He feels like he's doing a favor, a service to these kids who are being neglected and abused and ignored by their parents. And so that makes him an interesting character.
There is a man. He's involved in something.
We've just watched the first episode of NOS4A2, and I noticed that there's a little mention to Pennywise Circus. So I'd like to know if that's just a little Easter egg or if we're going to see other references like that.
It's definitely a little Easter egg for fans of Joe Hill and his dad, Stephen King. But I feel like we don't get into too much of crossover mythology in this show. We really stay pretty true to our narrative and the stories that we're telling from within the world of NOS4A2. But you never know what'll happen down the line. It's possible that that there'll be a little bit more of that crossover if we get to make more episodes.
Just imagine how it would be like Pennywise and Charlie Manx on the same
Yeah,
screen.
that'd be fun. That'd be good. I'd enjoy it.
I can't stand being under this roof with you.
I saw a bridge in the middle of the woods that was demolished years ago.
And NOS4A2 also brings a more intricate plot than other horror fictions. Do you think there is maybe a change in this type of genre?
Yeah, I think one of the things that makes our show unique is the collision of these two worlds. You have Vic McQueen, who's the protagonist of the show, and she's a young girl struggling with her identity and her place in the world, and struggling with a family that's a little bit more than a little bit dysfunctional. And so you have that storyline, which is about Vic's relationships with her family and her friends, and her waking up to her own power. And then you have Charlie Manx, who inhabits this kind of supernatural, twisted imagination world. And the two of those parallel narratives come together, and that's, I think, what sets our show apart and what makes it particularly interesting for audiences is to, usually shows are one thing or another, but this show is both of those things and a lot more.
Vic McQueen?
You said that you have read Joe Hill's book. How much of it has the series changed or not changed for you?
Yeah.
As an adaptation.
Well, I think that, by and large, the show really works to honor the original source material and to honor Joe's vision and his twisted imagination. Invariably, there are little changes that you make when you're lifting something off the page and putting it on the screen. Having an experience where you're reading something and telling yourself what the story looks like in your own imagination is one experience, but then being shown that world and the visuals of what that world is a very different experience. And so whatever changes were made were only to enhance that. I do think that we really work to keep the essence of the book the same and honor Joe and honor the novel, which I encourage people to read as well. It's a really good book. And the first season of the show only encompasses about a third of the novel. So there's a lot more stories to tell from within this book, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do that in future seasons.
I'm the only one with the power to stop him. And then I'm gonna burn Christmas Land to the ground. Something's happening to me.
What was the biggest challenge in playing the part on this show?
I think the biggest challenge was really the transformation, the physical transformation, and just making sure that I was always connected to exactly where Charlie was in his process of aging, which he does back and forth all the time. I think those were probably the aspects of the experience that were the most challenging, but therefore also the most rewarding.
You can find lost children. Don't you see you've been chosen?
It and The Conjuring and even Walking Dead, they have proven to be huge success. What is the biggest allure in this type of fiction, horror fictions?
Right. I think it gives people a place to escape, and I think it gives people a rush and a thrill to feel scared, but to also know that they're safe. I think horror genre stuff has been so popular and so enduring for that reason. We like to feel the sensation of adrenaline that comes with the circumstances and the characters and the worlds that are built in the horror genre, and I think that has a lot to do with it. Thanks for the opportunity to be here, and I hope people check it out starting Monday, June 3rd on AMC.